Hello, and welcome to my final presentation of my final project, Healthcare Cost Transparency Web App. My name is Tyler Lifke. This is for CS6440, Intro to Health Informatics. So real quick, in terms of agenda, we're just going to start out with the current introduction, talk a little bit about the context of health cost transparency, look at the project itself and then demo it, and finally talk about some future work. So in terms of context, the big one is obviously the United States spends a lot of money on healthcare, and it is more than double the amount of other OECD countries. There's a lot of different reasons for that, including kind of the disparate nature of the US healthcare system, the lack of a centralized authority which can negotiate rates down. We're not going to talk about any of those today. Instead, we're going to focus on kind of price transparency and how it kind of obstructs patients' ability to make informed decisions about their healthcare costs and what procedures they want done. The kind of big problem with this is that if you're a patient and you're going to a hospital, let's say you need to have a colonoscopy done, you don't necessarily know how much that hospital is going to charge you. You can call up the hospital and ask, hey, how much are you going to charge me for this colonoscopy? And they might not even give you an answer. Or if they give you an answer, it might be a kind of ludicrous amount. Or it'd be with the asterisk that says, well, it might depend on your insurance company. What is kind of odd, though, is that hospitals do have contracts with different insurance companies. So in theory, if you told them your insurance information, they should be able to tell you exactly how much you pay. In fact, a couple of different healthcare price transparency laws that have gone into effect in the past several years have been forcing hospitals to publish in machine-readable formats these contracts. And that has slowly made it more possible for patients to look up information about different hospital systems and different insurers and determine kind of what place or what providers they should be going to in order to get either the best care or the cheapest care, depending on their needs. One big problem that kind of stands in the way of this is that all of these different machine-readable files, one, aren't necessarily super patient-friendly, and two, are spread across a number of different websites. Even if it's within one hospital system that you're looking, oftentimes there are entirely different ways to access that information. So my proposal for my health cost web application was to build a patient-facing web app in Python using Dash and Django in order to enable patients to easily compare costs of procedures specific to their needs, healthcare plans, and geographic location. In addition to that, I wanted to learn how to build Django web apps, learn how to build Dash dashboards, and spin up a Postgres databases. Those are all data-related skills that I am interested in learning, and this project has kind of proven a perfect example of where I can learn it. So let's talk about the two primary components, and then a few other ones, a few other small ones. So the first one is the Find Care app. This is the primary portion of my project, at least in terms of what is showing on the front end. So this is it allows patients to search by location, procedure, and their insurance information in order to get at what hospital systems offer a colonoscopy. Of those, which ones are near me? Of those, which ones cost the least according to my insurance plan? This is built in Django, and the kind of front-end part of this is just a fairly simple web form that allows you to search by a couple of different fields. The back-end portion of this was by far the biggest lift because it required spinning up a Postgres database, uploading this data set, and formatting it in the way that Django can actually use. And Django is kind of object-oriented in its backend. It uses objects called models in order to kind of fill out a database with all of this information. And that took probably the bulk of my time. I'd say probably about 4 weeks of development time was devoted to the Find Care app backend, and then another 1 week to actually build the searchable front-end portion. There's also the Compare Insurers app, which allows you to look at a particular procedure and allows you to kind of compare how well different insurers will pay out for a particular procedure. And that'll be a little bit clearer once we actually see the application. Suffice to say, it's a good tool if you are trying to determine which insurer of multiple insurers that you should potentially go with if you know you're going to have a certain type of care. And finally, there's a couple of other pieces. There's the Postgres database backend that I mentioned earlier. There's also a special thanks to Turquoise Health, who provided the academic research data set for this project. In terms of the other pieces that I built, there's also an administrative site that I'll show very briefly that allows non-technical users to kind of go in and adjust the data as needed if there's things like typos or if a new provider needs to be added, a new plan needs to be added, that sort of thing. And finally, there's also a Find My Plan application, which was kind of my, when I was first fiddling around with the Find Care app, I was finding it a little bit too complex to add many filters as I wanted to in the final bit. So the Find My Plan app was kind of my way of showing myself how to do the front end portion of that before scaling it up. And it just allows patients to identify what their plan is before looking at the Find Care application. So in terms of the implementation status, we've gotten through everything, which is great. The only portion of this project that did not unfortunately get completed was actually hosting the Dash visualizations on Django. That turned out to be a little bit more of a technical lift than I was actually able to do. I spent about 2 weeks trying to do that, and the entire project itself is generally functional. It's just that they aren't housed under the same, basically website. And my project is not deployed anywhere, so that is kind of a perfect next step would be deploying this somewhere and also kind of incorporating those two. I'll talk a little bit more about why that happened later. So, on to the demo. So, you can see here that we have a single page here that has a number. Oh, excuse me 1 second. There we go. So here we have a number of different kind of rows in a table, each corresponding to a particular contract. This is the Find Care application, and it allows you to search by service. And if you know the CPT code, you can use that too. You can search by keywords in your plan. You can search by a couple of different locations. So in this case, let's imagine that I'm a 50-year-old man and I am searching for a place to do a colonoscopy visit. So if I do that colonoscopy visit, what if I'm looking in Chicago? Maybe I can see Amida Health St. Joseph Hospital Chicago seems to have a bunch of different entries, but I'm not actually anywhere near Chicago, so it's nice that I can see those, but I really need to be focused more on places in Minnesota, which is where I'm from. So let's type in Minnesota into the state contains form, and it'll take a second because it's querying the database, but you can see it doesn't take too terribly long. On startup, it does take up to 2 minutes to run, which is another thing I'll get to in terms of optimizations later. But you can see, we have a couple of different plans here. CPT code for a colonoscopy is right there, and we can see a couple of different rates. But I'm centered in Minneapolis, which happens to fall in Hennepin County. So let's see if we can filter first to Minneapolis. It looks like we've actually got quite a few options for Minneapolis here, which is pretty cool. However, let's say maybe I want to expand my scope, not just Minneapolis, but let's say all of Hennepin County, just to kind of look at a slightly different view. So we have a number of different plans over on the left. So let's say that I have a United Health Group plan, which is abbreviated UHC. So let's look for UHC. Okay, now we seem to have a fairly reasonable list. So we have a couple of different commercial plans, a couple of different Medicare plans, something called a target plan. Not exactly clear on what that is. All of these plans come directly from the hospital system's machine readable files. And those conventions are not necessarily consistent from hospital to hospital, or even from hospital to the insurance company that actually they have that plan with. But we can see if we're looking for a colonoscopy in and around Minneapolis, there's a couple of different options. So if I look at commercial plans, I can see, okay, 3,200, 3,200, 3,200. Okay, here's 600. Okay, that looks like it must be a lot cheaper. And it looks to be the same CPT code, and it's not too far away. Maple Grove is just one of the suburbs of Minneapolis. So maybe we take a look at Maple Grove Hospital. I can also see North Memorial Healthcare, which might be a little bit closer, and it looks like they actually have the same rate. So maybe those are even in the same hospital system. But it looks like $600 is a pretty good rate. But you can see I've saved $2,600 by not going to United Health Group's Southdale location, or to the M Health Fairview Southdale Hospital, which is a teaching hospital, and so necessarily has higher costs. But for me as a patient, if I want to pay lower costs, then I might instead consider Maple Grove. And this works just as well if we want to look at, say, renal care. And we can see we've got a couple more options here. Maybe a renal panel is just a little bit more common procedure, or maybe we're just looking at a slightly more limited data set, and colonoscopy is just not as well populated as renal disease. But we can see we've still got a bunch of different UHC programs. We actually have a lot of different plans now, and we can see that there's a pretty big variance in the rates that they charge, even within the hospital. So some of these might just be, Medicare has a negotiated rate of $9 versus, say, a commercial plan. This is probably a commercial plan. Is able to get a rate of $135 instead. So that's kind of the core platform here. Let's take a quick look at Dash. And let's imagine instead that we are looking at, that we are looking at a colonoscopy in Minnesota. So now we have kind of a different user story where maybe we're hunting for an insurance plan. We just got a new job, and there are a couple of different places that we can look at. Maybe there's Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and United Health Group plans all available at my job. It's nice that they give me all those options. So on this top section, it's just an aggregation of the average cost for colonoscopies across all of these different insurance companies, broken down by insurance company. So we can see United Health Group is fairly high, but not crazy high. It looks like Cigna's right there with them, but it looks like Blue Cross Blue Shield actually pays out quite a bit less. Not totally sure whether an insurance company paying out less is good for me necessarily. It might be that I actually get stuck with the bill. So perhaps going with either Cigna or United Health Group is actually better for me. If we narrow it down a little bit more to Minnesota specifically, we can see that Blue Cross Blue Shield and United Health Group, there's about a $200 difference. So Blue Cross Blue Shield is actually pays out a little bit more in Minnesota. It looks like Cigna is actually right around United Health Group, maybe a little bit less, $1,470 versus $1,530. So this application allows the patient to kind of compare these insurance companies, and I've only got 4 different procedures lined up in here just to make the app load faster. But we can see again, renal panel can be pretty expensive if you're looking at the list price, but even here the cash price is a lot less. And being able to compare to the cash price, potentially very useful. If your insurance plan is going to end up costing you more, maybe paying in cash for a cheap procedure makes sense. And we've even got the emergency visit in here too, which I like to highlight just because I find it pretty interesting. There's a couple of other small components here. I'll start with the Django administration site. This is a site that you have to log into in Django. It's secure, and you can kind of look at a little bit of the underlying data model that they have. Each of these here is a object model, or is a model object rather. So if I look at the providers, we can see that there are a number of different providers in here. Let's take a look at Wilson Medical Center. We've got Medicare provider ID, zip code, a couple of different location informations, even the number of beds that the hospital has. So that's all pretty interesting to have in here. So since I know we're very short on time, going back to the presentation, in terms of future work, I'd love to get the Compare Insurers app integrated into the Django framework. Unfortunately, after spending about 2 weeks on that and talking to Tarun, my TA mentor, we determined it was a little bit out of scope. Not that it's impossible to do by any means, but frankly, with my inexperience with both Django and Dash, I had a lot of trouble determining what was a problem that I was generating in Dash versus I was generating in Django. And then integrating the two, I had a lot of trouble finding documentation to help me fix my problems. Definitely a solvable problem, but not something I quite had time for. Next, I'd love to improve the look and feel for a patient-friendly interface. It's definitely a little bit bare bones at the moment. Look and feel wasn't quite in scope, but adding things like a nav bar, some basic CSS would be really, really nice. And then finally, I would love to expose the Turquoise dataset as a FHIR API. FHIR is something that we've talked about a lot in this class, and just as one example, it might be really useful to have an API that allows you, or that has a the procedure object from FHIR extended such that includes cost information, and in particular, cost information associated with a given provider and a given payer. And then other applications would be able to reference that FHIR API in order to incorporate cost information into their applications, and that would be great. And with that, I'd love to give just a really quick thank you to Turquoise Health LLC. They supplied the research data set that I was using for this project. They're awesome. They are very interested in healthcare cost transparency, and they also have a number of jobs available on their website. So shout out to them. If the instructors for this course are interested in doing something similar to my project in the future, I highly recommend reaching out to them. They were super responsive, got back to me in I think all of 2 or 3 days when I was asking about data sets. So yeah, greatly appreciate them. And thank you to Tarun, who is my TA mentor for this project. Thank you so much for helping me scope things out, helping me identify problems as they came up and kind of try and work through them, so thank you so much. And with that, we've come to the end of my presentation. Feel free to email me at tlifke3@gatech.edu if you have any questions. Thanks.